Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, September 20th, 2023. This is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan on the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we are a news podcast. We do try to get our sources from the most reputable places, from award-winning journalism that actually does its homework. We don't do sensationalism news like Fox News, Newsmax, or whatever extreme left or extreme right news you may get your news from. That being said, we do try to watch our language. Sometimes words do fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, how do we start this? Well, I think we might as well start with the biggest elephant in the room, the strike. I would be honestly remiss if we didn't talk about the strike. We know it's already went into effect. The strike I'm talking about is the United Auto Workers going against the big three, Ford, GM, and Stellantis. At this point, we are now day 4 going into day 5. And as we can pretty much tell the next couple of clips, nothing has changed.
United Auto Workers strike against Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. Stellantis is the international company that owns Jeep, Ram, and Chrysler. And while bargaining tasks are ongoing, there are no clear signs that this strike will end anytime soon. There are currently 12,700 workers across 3 assembly plants in 3 states on strike. The UAW says it could announce walkouts at additional plants soon, and these strikes could soon go international. Unifor, the union that represents auto workers up north in Canada, is preparing to go on strike against Ford as early as midnight this evening. Unifor's president told CNN over the weekend that the two sides are far apart. I want to bring in Tony Toddy, president of UAW Local 14 in Toledo, Ohio. He represents the GM facility that was on strike in 2019 that could possibly shut down again in the current strike. Thanks so much for joining us, Tony. You oversee about 5,000 members, 1,400 of which are active, currently working at this facility, and they're on the job right now. How are they feeling right now? Do they want to go on strike? Are they excited? Are they anxious? Are they worried? What's the emotion there?
Thanks for having me, Jake. They're a little anxious. We've been through there before. We've done it, and nobody's excited to go on strike once you've been on strike recently. But we're prepared. That's the thing about President Fain's strategy. Every single Big 3 local was prepared to go on strike. We tried to calm them down and let them know that we weren't going to, just because, when you take us down, you're going to take a lot of General Motors down. So we're waiting to see what the next phase looks like. But we're showing support to our crosstown union family over at Local 12. We just had a caravan of people go over yesterday to show them the support that they showed us back in 2019.
How long was your facility on strike for in 2019, and how did that impact the community?
It was 40 days, and facilities such as ours, we have a major impact on the community if we're down. You look at the tax revenue, police, fire, rescue, local businesses that we normally go to every single day when we're going to work and leaving, they all took a hit, and it's a major impact to the local economy. And Local 12 and the Jeep workers have 6,000 members there, so it's an even larger hit on the local community right now.
The union wants a 40% wage increase over 4 years. Is that the only acceptable deal? I know that's the starting position, but is the union willing to come down from that?
Well, we'll see at the table, but it's much more than just the pay, right? We're structurally broken from the bankruptcy deal that we're still working under. These temporary employees that go years on end without being turned into permanent employees, that means, working many years without contributing to your 401k. That's not getting the big profit sharing checks that Mary Barra and the rest of the CEOs say that every employee gets, but we don't. There's a lot of things. When you look at even our pensions, we haven't had an increase in our pension in 20 years. And we're just falling behind while these corporations make record profits and these CEOs make record compensation. We got that 40% number from Mary Barra and the $30 million that she receives a year. And they all sit on each other's boards. So they all approve these increases for themselves, and they do all the stock buybacks for the shareholders. But when it gets to us, they say, whoa, we can't afford that. Well, yeah, you can, because your profit margins show you can.
Yeah, and just so folks know, I mean, those numbers you're saying are real. Mary Barra, the CEO of GM, makes about $29 million a year. She's received a 34% increase in her salary over just the last 4 years. Do you believe this sort of secretive, coordinated approach of which plants go on strike and when is working and frustrating the big three automakers so far, and it's effective?
I think it is. I mean, I know the unintended consequence is the anxiety of our members. It's a new strategy that we've never tried before. We're in it, so we'll see if it works. Hopefully, we can get to a settlement pretty quickly. But it's going to depend on the corporations on whether or not they want to give us this fair deal. This sounds like a lot of money that we're asking for, but it really isn't. If we were being treated fairly for the last decade, this wouldn't be such a big hill to climb. But we're not accepting bad deals anymore. It's a new day. You can see it across the country, and you can see Americans supporting us by 75%, the poll showed. You look at the different industries, the airline industry, the Teamsters with UPS, and what we're seeing out in California with the writer strike and the actor strike. This country is tired of working for these companies through high inflation and the rest of it. We feel like we're falling behind, and these corporations are making out like bandits, and we're not accepting it anymore.
And you can't halfway blame them. I know I can't. But like he said, it is amazing at this point, because I said this on my TikTok as well as I'll say it here, that America's great at one thing. They are number one when it comes to the pay of an employee to a CEO. Most countries, you're maybe 15 to 1, 25 to 1, maybe even 50 or maybe even more. America shoots right past that. The last consensus that we took in 2022 had the employer to CEO pay ratio, right? You might have said pay ratio, 399 to 1. That was in 2022. 399 employees, their pay equals up to one CEO. And again, it amazes me how many times we had to keep bringing that up, that when a CEO's pay gets increased, as we will show, because we have the interviews from the CEOs, 2 before the strike actually happened and 1 post-strike. But again, these CEOs were making 20 million, 40 million, and that was given to them. So again, if one individual can make anywhere between 20 to 40 million, why is the labor force that actually gets them that actual increase get a share of the profits themselves? Again, now keep in mind, these are also the same 2 are the same big 3 that not long ago went to Congress and said, hey, we need money, otherwise we'll fail, these jobs will fail, America's economy structure will fail, dogs and cats will live together if you don't give us money. And I always thought that was weird, because you think for the biggest 3 automotive makers at the time to go get bailed out by Congress, every American should have got a free car. That's just me. But that being said, at the same time, these 3 automakers went to the U.S. government and got bailed out. Those very same workers, especially of those said workers of GM and of Ford, all sat there and said, well, we can't really sustain your pension and your, costs right now, but if you give them up, it helps us out, and at the end, we'll give it back to you, and then some. They never did. So you can only imagine that, folks. Again, and then also another thing, there are so many temporary people working at these plants that have never been full-time. For you, if you've never done temp work, let me tell you something. Temp work is probably the most scariest time for anybody. You are working, yes, but tomorrow's not promised. They can cut you. They can cut you that very same day. They can cut you tomorrow. They can cut you over your time off. You do not have any guaranteed employment as temp work. And for a lot of these for these not only for these big three, but other corporations, they love temps. Why? Cost effective. It's easier to let go and hire temps than it is to let go and hire full-time employees, because there's a cost to gaining them, and it's a cost to losing them. And what these corporations have figured out, it's cost effective to keep people as temps for years, not days, not months, for years on end, until they decide to make them full-time. And again, these are folks that are working these assembly lines, getting these cars together, that are just asking for simple things. Again, if your CEO is able to make $40 million to their salary, you're telling me that the same employees that work for the same CEO that got that increase can't get a 40% increase in their salary and a 32-hour work week? Again, that's not unreasonable. Well, Will, you got to think about it this way. They're wanting 32-hour work weeks for 40-hour pay. Based on the job, why not? See, here's the thing that a lot of these corporations are finding out, and the union president in the previous video had already said it best, that it's not just the automotive industry. It is the entertainment industry. It is the service industry. It is hospitals when it comes to nurses, when it comes to educators, when it comes to your maintenance workers of your local municipal areas. The thing of the matter is, people are getting tired of basically killing themselves for crumbs, while it's like few out there are okay because they're giving substantial payments. And especially, like I said before, and I said in the previous podcast, the United Auto Workers Union is the biggest union in the United States, totaling nearly over 146,000 members. And right now, what the UAW has done is actually done what they call strategic striking, which means that in some factories they did strike, but not all. Because again, if you do strike as a whole with these companies, a lot of progress is going to get halted. And these corporations operate off the fear that people, if they don't lose their job, people who don't work, they don't get paid, they lose everything, they're out in the street. Corporations feed off of that. But imagine, if you will, if every automotive worker decided that tomorrow they don't want to go to work. You have empty factories with management scrambling. And that's the power of a union. That's why I keep telling folks, unions matter. Unions have gotten people so many things. Even if you've never been in a union, the fact that a union was able to get you 40-hour work weeks, paid time off, sick leave, parental leave up to a certain point. We don't really get the parental leave we should be getting. But without these things were all gained from unions. I keep telling people, and I'll keep saying this again, never bargain with a corporation by yourself. Your voice is not enough. But in a union, they cannot ignore you because they did not plan for everybody to walk off the job that day. Now, again, switching gears for just 1 second, because they were talking about, as you probably heard in the last video, that they were also looking at Canada. Canada has their own United Labor Force, United Auto Workers called Unifor. And here's what I find interesting, right? Because in the U.S., they're panicking right now because of strike. However, in Canada, not so much. They actually have a tentative deal going on right now with Unifor to avoid a strike. Because, again, you don't want the U.S. and Canada deciding to go on a strike, which at this point they quickly got in a tentative agreement. Now, it's not made in stone yet with its 5,000 union members, but right now it's enough to avoid a strike. Keep in mind, I say for now, but unfortunately, there's no specifics of the tentative agreement. But again, could you imagine the U.S. and Canada both striking the automotive centers? Which I can go into a whole other thing about the fact that car lots and dealerships are already having a hard enough time trying to sell overpriced cars, banks not actually giving loans, and things of that nature. But could you imagine the fact of the matter that inventory just goes kaput? it would basically be what happened during it would basically be what happened during June and July, where car prices just took an enormous spike. But I digress. The fact that they kept Canada off the radar long enough. But again, it's tentative. Still may take a while to get there. However, there's also another person that decided that he has an answer for the automotive strikes, and it's everybody's favorite Uncle Tom, Mr. Senator Tim Scott, the lone black man of the conservative caucus, has decided that he's going to look back in history to every conservative's dream god of a president, Ronald Reagan. Yes, it is stupid. Yes, you shouldn't be surprised.
Republican presidential candidate Tim Scott, he was asked today by a voter about how he would respond to the strike.
Ronald Reagan gave us a great example when federal employees decided they were going to strike. He said, you strike, you're fired. Simple concept to me. To the extent that we could use that once again, absolutely.
If you strike, you're fired.
Yes. If you strike, you should be fired. That's what Tim Scott said. I looked to Ronald Reagan. You know what? They kill me. Because you know what Ronald Reagan did? Ronald Reagan is talking about the same strike that happened with United Auto Workers back in the 1980s, where he sat there and actually agreed with the big three at the time that if you strike, you should be fired because you should be thankful that you have a job. Ronald Reagan's words. And what does Senator Tim Scott decide to do? Oh, well, if you decide to strike, you should be fired. Great way to show Americans they can exercise their rights as Americans by you pretty much acting like a dictator. And this man is wondering why he's behind in the polls. Not because he's a black man trying to win an all-white party, but again, stupidity because of what he says. And we shouldn't be surprised by that. Because some politicians only go about who they got paid for. But again, I can go to whole Citizens United, but we ain't got that kind of time. Just know that for him, in his case, he's doing anything he can to remain relevant because he is still getting beat out by a soon-to-be convict who has yet to actually do anything on his campaign trail. I'm just saying. But speaking of this, guys, like I said before, the CEOs are interesting. And I said this before because we're about to go through two of the CEOs. We do have the CEO for Ford, Jim Farley. Yes, if you're wondering, he is related to Chris Farley. And of course, the General Motors CEO, who's in hot water just because of what she said. And then we have the CEO of Stellantis. Now, I'm going to try to make these interviews as quickly as short as possible. But I want you to notice there's a key thing that they all say in all their interviews. Here's Ford up first.
Thank you so much, Mr. Farley, for joining us. We'll get to the talks in a moment, but first, Ford will be unveiling the 2024 Ford F-150 tonight ahead of the Detroit Auto Show. Tell us a bit about that and what it means for your company.
Well, the F-150 is the most popular vehicle in America for 41 years and the most popular truck for 46 years. On revenue alone, it's larger than the entire size of Starbucks or Netflix. So it's a huge business for not just Ford, but our economy. I think we're going to end the tailgate wars with a very creative solution. Our hybrid F-150 can power your house for 7 days and get better fuel economy too. So we have a lot of new technology.
Sounds impressive and very exciting, but I would have to imagine that a lot of your attention at this particular moment is on this potential strike. Just break down for us where things stand at this hour on the negotiations between the UAW and Ford. Are you any closer to reaching a deal?
We're really in the heart of the negotiations now. We're about 48 hours until our contract expires. So just about 2 days. This is really negotiations for the future of automotive manufacturing in the U.S. We are putting forth an offer today that's the most lucrative offer in 80 years working with the UAW. Large pay increases, top 1% health care. We're going to be, we have profit sharing. We're going to be adding inflation protection. We're going to be getting rid of all the tiered labor. Our team gets 5 weeks of vacation. They get another 17 days off. A lot in the offer. but this will be the most lucrative offer and will require a lot of belt tightening at the company. And there's a limit how far we can go because we have to keep investing for the transition of the industry. We're very optimistic that we can reach an agreement with the UAW in the next 2 days. And it's very important for the country.
You mentioned that 48-hour deadline. Bottom line, how confident are you that you can avoid a strike between the UAW and Ford before the end of the week?
Well, rhetoric aside, it's time for us to come together. We put in our first offer a couple weeks ago, and we still haven't found the right deal for both sides, but we're still confident that we can reach a deal because it is so important for the U.S. economy and for our country, and for, of course, those 57,000 workers. We're the most committed to UAW, so it's critical that we find a deal, but there is a limit, as I said. We're not going to mortgage our future.
And what about the union demand on reinstatement of pensions for new workers or their calls for a 4-day, 32-hour work week? Are either of those still on the table?
I think they are from the UAW standpoint, but we can't have a sustainable industry working 4 days a week. Look, we've been very profitable as a company. We're returning from profitability. We didn't go bankrupt. Many of our competitors did. And now we've built this very competitive, profitable company. We have more work to do on that, by the way, on cost and quality. And we want everyone to benefit from that. But we also have to invest in this huge transition to electric, partial electric future, $50 billion in Ford's case, and we need the profitability to invest.
According to SEC filings, you received nearly $21 million in total compensation in 2022. In comparison, the median total compensation for Ford employees was about $75,000. That's a 281-to-1 ratio. Do you think that gap should change?
Well, I think, first of all, my job is to add value to the company and to make sure all of our workforce is handsomely rewarded, that we all benefit in growth. And yes, that's, at all levels of the company, we have to be competitive. But my goal is just totally focused on making sure we have a vibrant future for everyone, especially our factory workers. My grandfather was an hourly worker for Ford. And we want to make sure everyone has a future, but we have to be competitive.
Talk about the.
So I'm going to stop it right there because you guys just saw that, right? You saw that. The anchor woman there sat there and said, SEC filings show you got a nice substantial package totaling $21 million. Your worker to CEO ratio there, literally over 262-to-1. Do you think that your workers deserve a raise? Well, he couldn't give an answer. He doesn't want to give an answer because you know why? And this is the reason why I love journalism. I love journalism because he can't deny the fact that you, sir, Mr. Jim Farley, CEO of Ford, make $21 million in one go. You can't even give back the pensions, which I talked about a few minutes ago, where Ford went to its workers and sat there and said, we need to give up your current pension ratios right now to keep us afloat. They disagreed with it, but still did it on the promise it would come back with then some. It still happened. Combine that with temporary workers, combine that with scheduling, because if you've never worked in a factory, it is not 9 to 5. It is not. If you think it's 9 to 5, you are seriously delusional. Just like Mr. Farley over there believes that, hey, I think that we can do this and we're fine. But did you notice something? Did you notice the pattern there for a second? It's always, he's not talking. What he's not doing, he's not talking to the UAW workers. He's talking to his shareholders. He's saying, oh, well, we could, but if we did this, we couldn't invest. And the electric transition that we're going to have to do in the future, just giving them what they want is just not sustainable. We just can't do it. When obviously, if they can find $21 million to pay one guy, yeah, you can do it. Because again, as I keep saying with these corporations, even in a pandemic setting like we are right, even in a post-pandemic setting like we are in right now, they're still making a profit. Go to the stock market for Ford, for GM, for Stellantis. They're not taking hits; they're gaining. So, for the simple fact of the matter is, what Jim Farley was doing in that scenario was not talking to the viewers like you and me. He's talking to his shareholders that we're going to stand strong. We're going to get these people back on the line, and we're not going to give them the 40% pay increase, which they can do. We're not going to give them a 32-hour work week, which they can do. We're not going to give them back the same pension investing ratings that we had 20 years ago, but you can. See, the one thing about corporations, and I'm going to point this out, especially with the next guy, they always do the same thing. They invest in the company, but will never invest in their workers, because God forbid, if someone working asks for a pay increase, you just hear the buttholes tighten up faster than the wallets do. But anyway, here's the CEO Mark Stewart from Stellantis. When they ask him, all I'm going to say is rinse and repeat.
Hey, Joe. Mark Stewart, COO of Stellantis, joining us from the headquarters here in Auburn Hills. Where do things stand right now with negotiations?
Well, as we came up last week, contract expiration, we've got 2 plants that are out at the moment. We put together a very compelling offer last week, which was not accepted, including a 20% wage, 21% cumulative over the period, provisions for cost of living adjustments, some great provisioning and enhancements to our 401k plan, and maintaining our awesome benefits of just Diamond Star, top 2% of the nation, 100% coverage, Phil. So where are we today? We're back at the table. We're working. Our subcommittees and the UAW subcommittees are diligently working every day to resolve issues, and we're looking forward to getting this resolved.
But you've heard Shawn Fain. He said your last offer, is a no-go. And as far as he's considered, they've got to amp up the pressure on you as well as Ford and General Motors. What are you expecting come Friday at noon?
I think that in the coming days, we'll continue to sit at the table, work through things, try to find the common ground, and work super diligently in good faith to find that common ground. And I hope we're able to do that by Friday.
Do you think there's possibility of more strikes? Are you preparing for more strikes?
Yeah, we have our contingency plans that were in place that executed and the contract expired. So our key focus, Phil, is making sure we've got our customers covered to the best of our ability on the front end of a sale, on the Mopar service side, if somebody has a service need as well. So we're really making sure we're being careful.
Let's talk about Mopar.
Sure.
That's at the heart of you guys saying we want to downsize our footprint in North America, make it more efficient. You've got 18 facilities. You want to eliminate a number of those. And then there's Belvidere, your idled assembly plant outside of Rockford, Illinois. How much do you want to bring down that footprint? And their complaint is, look, you're gonna squeeze us out of jobs.
Yeah. So first and foremost, and we were very clear with the union, very transparent, this is not about job reduction. There is zero job change in the proposal we have towards those 18 factories, PDC, Part Distribution Center. It's really about modernizing those. A lot of those are quite older. They're in the wrong location in terms of our ability to get to the customers faster, and we want to invest in those. And some of the locations then are not the right ones, but zero changes to the jobs across Mopar. As well as part of our 2038 plan, zero carbon footprint, net zero carbon footprint, is to shrink our space, right? We get more efficient every year. We want to reduce that carbon footprint and do our part for the environment.
Will Belvidere be a manufacturing facility again?
So on the Belvidere side, we offered a very great solution prior to contract expiration last week that would in fact take care of preserving the jobs in Belvidere for the life of the contract.
But it may not be manufacturing.
We're not giving the details of that. That's at the table of discussions with them. But what we will share is it was to take care to make sure those 1,200 folks who want to come back to Belvidere, there are jobs available, very good jobs available for them. But we'll back at the table discussing that because that was something prior to the negotiation ending.
You brought up your contingency plan. You've got more inventory than your competitors, and you've got the parts to support that. How long do you expect this to go? I mean, obviously, you don't want to sit here and say, well, we don't have the cars or the trucks to sell, but you've done that. But how long in your heart do you believe this strike likely goes?
We are hoping it gets resolved super quickly, which is why we're at the table, subcommittees at the table yesterday, today, continuing through the week. We were down at Solidarity House yesterday. And again, we want to resolve it quickly, Phil.
But in terms of the inventory there, you've got that inventory pretty extensive, correct?
We wanted to make sure that we've got our customers covered through this whole process. It's important that we take care of our folks internally. It's important that we take care of our customers externally, Phil. So we're doing the right things.
Mark Stewart.
Again, it's the same thing. It is literally the same thing. Oh, well, we're still at the negotiating table. Okay. Well, we offer them a very nice package. You offer them half of what they're asking for. And then you're closing down a location, which means that over 1,300 jobs are going to be affected. But, you know, I love the double speak. Well, we're working on something. We did offer something toward the end of their contract. Severance. Just say severance. You offered severance packages. Probably not very good ones, but you probably did. Oh, well, the Belvedere plant's not closing down. Yes, it is. Because, again, notice, again, call me out if I'm wrong on this. But if you haven't noticed, anytime with these people that are decision makers in each of these big three, they all say the same thing. They're being positive, they're being upbeat, but they try to make the UAV the enemy. Well, they're just you can't reason with them. They just have unrealistic expectations. No, they don't. But it's amazing how corporate America right now is trying to hunker down, especially with these big three, and they're trying to all stare and say that no, they're the problem. They're the reason why this is happening. They're the reason. If they don't shape up, we won't be able to sustain this. Okay. But it's funny. I said rinse and repeat. We now have the GM discussion. They had the GM interview on Good Morning America. Tell me when I'm telling lies if it doesn't sound like the exact same interview we just watched 2 times already.
On our top story, the United Auto Workers going on strike, taking unprecedented action against all big three automakers at once. Joining us now is Mary Barr, the CEO of General Motors. Mrs. Barr, thank you so much for joining us. And you are in the midst of a strike, and you at GM, you said your final offer for what you was called unprecedented. It was a raise of 20% over the life of the contract, including 10% in the first year. Were you surprised the union rejected it? And is that offer still on the table?
Well, it's great to be here today. And, as we look at the situation we're in, I'm extremely disappointed and frustrated that we're on strike, because when you talk about the offer that you just reviewed, the offer is still on the table. And it's a very strong offer, not only from a gross wage perspective, the 20% that compounds to 21% over the life of agreement, but also maintaining world-class health care and job security because of the allocations we've made to all of these plants. They have product and components to continue to build. So disappointed where we're at, but the deal is still on the table, and we're still at the table ready and waiting to negotiate to get people back to work.
And the union's asking for 40% hike in wages, which it says matches the pay increases that you and your fellow big three CEOs received over the last 4 years. The union said this workers' salaries went up just 6% over that same time period. Is that accurate and fair?
Well, I don't know where the 40% came from. I will tell you from an executive compensation perspective, 92% of my compensation is based on performance. So when we look at where we are from a GM perspective, when GM does well, our employees do well. We've had record profit sharing over the last several years that our employees have participated in. And now, in addition, we're putting a 20% gross wage rate increase, along with other bonuses that come as a part of that. So this is a very, very strong financial offer, again, along with other world-class benefits and healthcare. And the fact, and I think what our employees is most important to them is job security. And that's important when we're in the middle of a transformation from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles, and also a very competitive industry.
Yeah, which is a big transformation to go to EV. And, last year, the company's adjusted earnings before interest and tax was a record $14.5 billion. You talked about profit sharing, but profit sharing with your workers was just $500 million. They say you can afford to pay them more. So what's your response to that?
Well, again, each of our employees got over $12,750 from a profit sharing perspective. I think that's significant. But from a profit perspective, everybody has to understand the profits that General Motors makes, we reinvest in the business, we reinvest in our people to put new products, because having products that people want to buy is the way that we keep all of our assembly plants running. So we've been investing in our people, in our facilities, to make sure we have a strong portfolio so we maintain the leadership position we have in this country. General Motors sells more vehicles than anyone else.
And you talked about your transformation over from to EVs, from combustion, but that's another concern among union members because they're concerned that those cars may require fewer workers to build.
Well, at General Motors, I know there's a lot of people who are making different assumptions or statements about the transition from EV to AV. One of the things that General Motors has done, though, because we want to make sure we take all of our employees along with us in this transformation, is we developed power units internally, and we're now allocating them to the plants that build today's internal combustion engine vehicles. So we have a very concentrated plan that we've worked on for several years now to make sure that we have work for all of our employees as we make this transformation. You know, our employees are very talented. The work that they did through COVID, the work and how they managed the semiconductor shortage and supply chain challenges we still see today, they're world class. And in fact, for the last 2 years, General Motors has been recognized as having industry-leading quality by J.D. Powers. That's a result of the talented team that we have on the manufacturing floor.
Yeah, and I could say they definitely are talented and they're the best at what they do. But it's not just GM that's affected. UAW is doing something that's never done before, striking at all three major automakers at the same time. But instead, it's only going to walk out a select plant. So how will that impact your business? And will it keep you from keeping, will it be able to keep operations running? Will you be able to keep them running?
Well, right now, the plant that is on strike is our Wentzville plant, and they build the Chevrolet Colorado and the GMC Canyon. These are brand new mid-sized trucks that are doing very well in the marketplace, as well as our cargo van that is also in strong demand as well. So, you know, this can have an impact in a matter of days, but right now, our other plants are running.
Will you be back at the bargaining table today?
We're there now. We're ready and want to get back to it. We want to problem solve. We want to get people back to work as quickly as possible.
Well, we hope that that is the case and that it happens.
Well, again, I can't keep this up all day. You just heard from all three CEOs, all saw the same. Upbeat, positive. Oh, it's not a problem. We can still keep going regardless. They're just being unreasonable. We've given them a great package. We've given them profit sharing. We've given them a substantial raise. I mean, it's 20%. You can get by with 20%. Don't worry about the $29 million I made this year and received a 34% increase over the last 4 years I've been CEO. Don't worry about that. Do you see how they sound? And again, it's funny how they always turn around and sit there and say, well, especially in the, Mary Barra's case, well, I don't know where this 40% is coming from. I don't know where this 40% increase is coming from. Well, because you literally made $29 million this year and received a 34% increase over the last 4 years. So I wonder where that number 40%, I wonder where that 40% came from, because if you were able to get 34% over the last 4 years, then a 40% increase in pay for employers, your employers, can't be that unrealistic. And it's always funny when they try to say, well, it's over. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, it's over the part of the over the limit of the contract. And I really want to quickly go over that. That doesn't mean it's increasing now. That means over the contract. So again, say their collective bargaining agreement is for the next 10 years. Then over the next 10 years, their pay increase will increase up to 21% by that 10th year. So again, the whole idea of a pay increase, it's not immediate, it's over the contract, is bullshit. It really is. And at the same time, the fact that they're not talking about bringing back the pensions that they once had, the pension rates, investments, it's always this whole thing of we're investing in our workers. Well, if you were, you'd be paying them. Well, what about the EV transition? Again, you'll have credits galore because of the fact that the U.S. government is pushing toward electric vehicles and are giving tax breaks to corporations to do that. So the money is there. At the same time, I really, honestly, I really, really wish that those CEOs, those two CEOs and one CEO would all say the same thing. We don't want to pay them. Because why? We got ours, we're taken care of. Why should we care about them? And that's what it is. They don't care. These CEOs and one COO have the ability right now to come to sit there and say, you know what, guys, we'll give you your 40% pay increase. We'll give you your 3-day, we'll give you your 32-hour work weeks. We will give you back the pensions at the rates that you once had them at, plus interest. We will give you all these things. But understand, if we do this, we'll take a hit. It's the old cheeseburger. You know what it is? For all those don't remember, it's the old McDonald's cheeseburger angle. You know, if we raise the wages of those that work at McDonald's, the cheeseburger will be $5. The cheeseburger will go from $1 to $5. That's the lie they tell themselves. That's the lie. Because if you haven't noticed, pay has barely went up at fast food joints, $15. And guess what? It is no longer cheap to it's no longer cheap at McDonald's now. And it's not because of the fact they're paying more. It's the fact that greed and capitalism has taken over to a point to where companies still have to get record high profits by any means necessary. So again, I am with the strike. I am with the United Auto Workers Union. You know what? If it takes shutting down their plants to get their attention, then do it. Then we'll see how much of an asset these CEOs really are. I'm just saying. But moving right along, guys, from one story to another. Again, this story is about as old as time, and we really shouldn't be surprised the word government and shutdown are being echoed in the same sentence once again.
And the clock is ticking on a potential government shutdown. Congress has less than 2 weeks to pass bills that keep the government running. This is House Republicans are divided over whether to oust Speaker Kevin McCarthy from his role. Let's bring in ABC's Jay O'Brien on Capitol Hill for more. Jay, you are a busy man this week, so let's start with this potential shutdown. A group of House Republicans have put a short-term funding bill on the table. So what's the latest on that?
Yeah, shortest explanation I can give here, Diane. They have 12 days to fund the government before funding expires and there is a government shutdown. They can't pass government funding likely within that window. So Congress has got to do a temporary measure, kick the can down the road, keep the doors open in the federal government until a certain period while they can work out the broader funding discussion. And so last night, overnight, House Republicans, two factions in the House Republican Conference, came to agreement on a temporary funding measure that has a lot of partisan Republican red meat in it as well. And even that is not likely to pass the Senate, but there's a question of if it would even pass the Republican-controlled House. There are 10 Republicans right now in the House, at least 10, who have said they're not going to vote for this CR, this continuing resolution, to keep the doors of the federal government open. They can only afford Kevin McCarthy to lose 4. That's why when our cameras caught up with him this morning, he was unsure if a CR would pass. Here's what he said.
It's a good thing I love a challenge. So every day is going to be a challenge. We got a long week. We're not September 30th yet, but the one thing I'll tell everybody, I've never seen anybody win a shutdown. You only put the power in the hands of the administration. We just have to get together, figure it out, and move forward.
Good thing I love a challenge. This is going to be a challenge, is how he began those remarks there. Again, as you said, the clock is ticking. There's not a lot of consensus in the Republican conference as to whether or not this CR could pass. And even if it does pass the House, there is virtually no possibility in which that passes a Democrat-controlled Senate and gets signed by the president. So the reality is there's still a lot of work that needs to be done up here on Capitol Hill in order to avoid a government shutdown by the end of the month.
All right. Jay, Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace says everything's on the table in this funding battle. But she also says she expects a shutdown. So what are the next steps?
Well, right now, if there isn't some kind of a deal between Republicans and Democrats in the two chambers of Congress, you're hurtling towards a shutdown. And the reason why is somewhat of a little bit of what I described, is you've got to pass some kind of stopgap funding measure to keep the doors open in the House and in the Senate and then the president has got to sign it. So there's got to be bipartisan agreement on the measures in that CR. Right now, the one that Republicans agreed to last night has big cuts to federal spending, except for defense, the VA, and the Department of Homeland Security, but it also has got hardline immigration stances in it. So it's likely dead on arrival in the Senate. So there's got to be more of a deal to be done to avoid a government shutdown.
And we might as well be honest, there's probably going to be a government shutdown. Only because you have the House. Again, I keep pointing this out. Listen, when the GOP took the House, I sat there and said, but look, if you expected anything but productivity from the GOP, you're not going to get it. I mean, keep in mind, this is the same GOP that had to vote in Kevin McCarthy 15 times to get him to be House Speaker. This is the same GOP that sat there and said when they got voted in that their number one mission was to impeach President Biden. Sound familiar? That they wanted to impeach, that they wanted to go after the DOJ because they felt the DOJ and the FBI were weaponized against their leader, Trump. And what have they done? They have turned around and subpoenaed the Attorney General Merrick Garland. They have turned around and subpoenaed the director of the FBI. We should not be surprised at this point that now, as we're coming up, we're not too far off from a possible government shutdown at the end of the month. That again, you have Democrats and Republicans trying to figure out how to keep Congress running. Well, here's the problem. The fact of the matter is just that Republicans want spending cuts to basically working people. You know, it's funny what they always said, don't cut the defense, don't cut the VA, and don't cut the Department of Homeland Security. Wait, what? The VA I get. If anything, the VA should get more spending. Defense gets a blank check. Every fiscal budget, the U.S. Department of Defense gets a blank check. This is the same Department of Defense that has failed every audit because it can't even account for a penny, but they get a blank check. And Department of Homeland Security, I'm going to be honest, to me it's like the Space Force. Why are you here? Really and truly, why are you here? And somehow, some way, how come you haven't been disbanded as of yet? Because this is the problem with it. Republicans will say Democrats spend too much. Democrats will say Republicans cut way too much to the point to where we're surprised everything's still running. You are not going to get a bipartisan bill. Good luck. It's amazing how many times it's been said, well, there needs to be a bipartisan bill that everybody can live with. Not when you have Democrats who are just ready to try to do their best to resolve the issue of what Dorito did 4 years ago versus a GOP GOP-controlled House that is too busy trying to figure out do they want to impeach Biden or get rid of Kevin McCarthy. Good luck, because at this point, I always sit there and said, government shutdowns never affect politicians. They never do. Their pay still goes through. Their healthcare still works. All that still works. You know what government shutdowns affects? Those that are using government services. Those that use Medicare and Medicaid. Those that use food stamps. Those that use TANF or things of that nature. Those that use SNAP benefits. Those that have daycare through government subsidiaries. Those things stop when a government shutdown stops. All the more reason why you would think, because these are the people that got voted in, that you would honestly think that if your benefits get halted, but theirs don't, that you're not looking at them a little bit funny. Again, something is wrong there. But speaking of things that are wrong, this is an interesting story because, yes, I should be surprised. Only in the South can this actually happen, but this was not on my bingo card of 2023.
Police in Birmingham, Alabama have newly released body camera video of a confrontation between officers and a high school band director. And a warning, some viewers may find this footage disturbing. In this clip, you can see at least 3 officers surrounding the band director after Thursday night's game. They say they asked that director to get the band to stop playing music, but he refused. That's when the video shows him being hit with what appears to be a stun gun several times by one officer and then placed in handcuffs. That band director was then arrested and charged with disorderly conduct, harassment, and resisting arrest. NBC News Correspondent Blaine Alexander is following this story for us. So, Blaine, what more do we know here about what happened, and what are we hearing from all of the involved parties, the band director, the police, the school?
Well, Clay, I just finished speaking with that band director. He said that he has gone to a doctor's appointment to kind of check up on basically his health after the tasing incident. But he says that he's traumatized by what happens. But more importantly, to his point, he says that his students are traumatized by watching all of this happen. So I'll start with what police are saying. Police are saying that it all unfolded after a football game last week where the police told both band directors to stop their bands from playing. They say that this band director, Johnny Mims, who was part of the visiting team, did not stop. They tried to get him to do so, and that's when things escalated, that he resisted putting his hands behind his back, according to police, and so that's what led to the tasing incident. But when I spoke with Mr. Mims, he said that this was part of a planned arrangement between the two bands, something that's typically known almost as the fifth quarter. They expect the bands to keep playing for several rounds between the two of them as the crowds begin to leave the stadium. He said it was nothing unusual, nothing out of the ordinary from what they typically do. In fact, he had coordinated with the other band director as well. So he says that when officers came up to him, he was on the podium, he was directing, and he said that he told them, "This is our last song, we're going to stop after this." But then he told me what happened next. Take a look.
Before I know it, I did see the officer tase me. I went down, and after that point, I was tased additional 2 more times by the same officer and then a different officer. At this point, I can't even remember after that point because I was so stunned and so baffled. All I remember is hearing all of my students screaming, all of the parents crying.
So there are a number of investigations into this, Clay. The school district is doing its own. Birmingham Police Department also investigating, having an internal investigation there. We understand that Mr. Mims is placed on administrative leave, as is procedure during incidents like this, during investigations like this. And his attorney is asking that the officers involved be placed on leave as well. We're going to hear more from the band director and his supporters tomorrow during a press conference tomorrow morning. Sinclair.
So again, I did not have this on my bingo card 2023. You know, it's one of those things where I just gotta ask, like, why? Okay, I'm not a fan of police. Let me just start with that. I am not a fan of police. I will always sit there and say F the police and beyond that. That also being said, it's a football game. The fact that if you've been to football games, bands are always playing near the end, some areas, depending where you're at. I know I'm in the South. So usually when football games are over, the band are usually playing on the way out. That's just the way I'm accustomed to it. Now, I get that the police got to do their job. They have to escort, clear out the field, things of that nature. Maybe there was a miscommunication issue. Maybe more should have been done. But the guy's there, at another video, which I wasn't able to get, but another video of the guy, the police go up to the guy goes, get out of my face. Now, I admit, I don't like cops, but if an officer's asking you to do something and you say, get out of my face, that's not going to elicit a positive response from law enforcement. At the same time, on the law enforcement side, de-escalation, just saying. I mean, it's a whole thing like I said before. This is the problem I have with law enforcement, with law enforcement in America, is that you have this ramped up escalation. It's like, if you hear get out of my face, it's like, okay, hold up. Before you get hostile with me, let me explain something. We got to clear out this field, okay? I understand the band that you're playing. And let's try to eat. Look, we all want to go home. Let's all go home properly. So you would think de-escalation tactics would be perfect right there. The cop did not use them. But I still gotta ask this question. What was the whole point of using a taser? You obviously had backup. The guy wasn't a threat. He obviously wasn't armed. Why in the blue hell did you feel the need to taser a band director in front of the students? See, I could fault the band director for just not trying to explain the situation, but I could also fault law enforcement because they decided they do what they do best. If you don't comply, they immediately go to force because that's how they're trained. I've said it once, I'll say it again. In law enforcement, you can become a police officer faster in America than you can a plumber, a nail tech, or even just a flat-out construction worker. The fact of the matter is there is something wrong with our law enforcement when they're too easy to go to force instead of using de-escalation. Now, I'm not saying the band director may have not been completely absolved. But let's be honest, we've all wanted to tell police a time or two, get the fuck out my face. We've all been inclined to do that. But we're going to follow that story as it goes along. The only thing I can sit there and fault the police officers for is the fact that, again, you use force when you didn't have to. Sometimes a little bit of honey goes a long way than trying to use shit. That's all I'm pointing. That's all I'm pointing out. But another story which actually hits close to home because yours truly does have locks. The fact that we have the Crown Act in place and schools want us to have these white boy bowl cut haircuts so freaking bad to the point to where they'll suspend a kid just because of his hair. Again, not on my bingo card of 2023.
Texas school is once again in the spotlight for penalizing a student over his natural hair.
We're going to fight this fight.
Daryl George's mother says the 17-year-old has been punished for more than 2 weeks, held in school suspension because of his dreadlocks, which the school claims violates the dress code. The suspension was handed down just as the so-called Crown Act took effect in Texas. The law bans discrimination based on hair texture or hairstyles associated with race.
CROWN stands for Creating an Open and Respectful World for Natural Hair.
Barbers Hill Independent School District says its dress code is not in conflict with the Crown Act and that protective hairstyles are permitted but must comply with the dress and grooming code, which states male students' hair will not extend at any time below the eyebrows or below the earlobes.
Because of his hair, they said that when let down, his hair is below his eyebrows, which they never seen his hair let down because, as you can see from pictures, from all the pictures, his hair is always up. So they just basically picking with my child.
In 2020, another student at the same school was banned from graduation over his locks. He sued and helped spur the movement to get the Crown Act passed. Experts say the Crown Act can be vague in some areas, and while hair length is not mentioned, it could be implied.
Length could be a way to discriminate against certain hairstyles without being openly discriminatory.
He's going to go to school every day. He's going to go to school in dress code, not violating a dress code.
It's one of those we shouldn't be surprised situations. Like I said, I got locks. I love my locks. Would not change them for the world. But it is amazing, and I say this all the time, and look, I'll stand on it. I just think that white people just have a fascination with hairstyles that they cannot get. I'm going to be dead honest. And, I think it's an obsession. I think it's an obsession when it comes to black people's hair that white people just have an issue with it, that you can't replicate it or do it. So what do? You make it forbidden in education, as if hair has ever been a problem for black kids going through school. Not the fact that we've been disenfranchised, literally left at a disadvantage. Certain things are taken away from us, but you're worried about our goddamn hair? That's what you're worried about? Again, this is the part where I have this issue with it. It's one of those things to where, why in the blue are you worried about my child's hair when you should be worried about my child's education? That's what you're there for. You're not there to actually sit there and play beautician. Because again, locks are beautiful. I wholeheartedly endorse locks. White people, I just feel, again, it's a white people obsession with black hair. It's a white people obsession with black things that just, it creeps me out. At the same time, the fact that if they can't do something, they outlaw it. Hence why the Crown Act was there. Because women should be able to wear their natural hair. Men should be able to wear locks. Afros are beautiful. Afro puffs are beautiful. Waves are beautiful. If you want to do a braid or straight or whatever style that you love, it should not have you discriminated from what you're able to do because you want to express yourself by your hairstyle. Nothing wrong with that. It's just the fact that a bunch of white people was basically want us walking around conforming, which is really another thing that goes with a whole other story. But again, we'll follow that story as it goes along. Ron DeSantis, again, I know why I bring this man up, but dictator Governor Ron DeSantis believes that he can get gas down to $2 a gallon. Where have we heard this one before?
So you're here in Midland, Texas to launch your energy plan. Part of that would include having gas prices go to $2 a gallon by 2025. But early on as governor, you really were pushing electric vehicles. Now, this plan really has a heavy emphasis on fossil fuels. Why the change?
Well, there hasn't been a change. So as governor, I got money from the Volkswagen settlement to do EV infrastructure. So I could either use it or lose it. So that's why we did it. We put in the charging stations, but I would never support mandating the production of EVs. I think that should be driven by the market. We're also now in a situation where this is the worst inflation and the highest cost families have faced in America for many decades. And they're getting hit from all sides. Energy dominance, using the resources we have, that is one way to reduce prices at the pump, which is hurting people, but also prices throughout the economy, because energy prices permeate the cost of goods, it affects businesses. And then, of course, the larger context of this helps our national security to be energy dominant. And so that's the message that we're delivering. And our goal is, come 2025, if we implement all these policies, we have gas close to $4 nationally. Let's get it down to $2. That's the goal.
I am Ron DeSantis.
So let's point something out here. He literally said nothing. He said nothing. It was amazing. The question was right there. It was literally, how will you get gas down to $2 a gallon? Oh, well, we have certain policies and funds, and once we get them implemented, gas will go down to $2 a gallon. For about 1 minute and 21 seconds, he said nothing. And I have to keep pointing this out because there are people out there that really do believe this, and I feel like this needs to be said. Whether you're the governor of Florida or the president of the United States, you do not control gas prices. You don't. You know who does? OPEC. That organization that produces crude oil, which, again, the U.S., still number one producer of oil. Saudi Arabia is number 2, Russia's number 3, so far and so forth. But those companies, BP, Shell, Exxon, I can keep going down the list, they control the cost of crude oil. The cost of crude oil equals up to what you pay at the pump. If there is a disruption, or say, for instance, you have hurricanes that hit oil refineries off the coast, therefore production is going to be slowed down in some areas, which drives the cost of crude oil up, which basically increases prices at the gas pump. That's how it works. There is not a magic pill out there. There's not a magic pill. There's not this hidden reserve of oil that people think is out there in Alaska or offshore. There's nothing out there like that. That is the reason why we're transitioning to energy-dependent vehicles, because the only way we're going to make ourselves sufficient and productive, once again, is to jump off the dinosaur juice. But nobody outside of those corporations can control gas prices. This is why you shouldn't take things that what Governor Dictator Ron DeSantis says seriously just because it sounds good. But in theory, he said nothing. Just throwing that out there. But speaking of things throwing that out there, it's always funny because just not too long ago, they were worried, conservatives and repressed linear-minded people were worried about drag queen shows. Oh, well, we don't want our children going to drag queen shows. We don't want our children getting read stories in a library by a drag queen because they could be disruption. It's you're putting sexual acts in front of our children. Yeah. You ever notice that we've never had a report of an issue at Drag Queen Storytime Hour or a drag queen show where a child may or may not have been influenced in any way like that? But those that are against it figure they'll go to anywhere else and be a nuisance? Enter Lorraine Boebert.
Boebert. Say it 3 times and she appears in security video from a weekend performance of Beetlejuice, where the congresswoman was kicked out of the theater for being disruptive. The DCPA says she was vaping. Boebert's team denied that, said the haze was from fog machines in the show. That claim goes up in smoke when you see the video. The pregnant woman sitting behind Boebert told the Denver Post she asked her to stop vaping, and Boebert refused. Her one-woman show continued, taking flash photos, raising her hands and dancing, often the only one clapping or standing up in the crowd. Boebert occasionally took a break from being disruptive to enjoy the company of her male companion. He briefly had a grasp on the situation before ushers returned and told Boebert she had to leave. The theater's incident report says Boebert pulled the "Don't you know who I am" card on the way out, appearing to give theater employees the single finger salute.
In case you missed it, Nature.
Why are we surprised? Again, Lorraine Boebert, if you don't know who she is, the woman that had a failed bar to where everybody could carry. The same woman that sat there and said that we're going to impeach Biden, although she had no reason to. The same woman who literally just went to a stage play and decided to be a nuisance. Gee, not one drag queen to be found. And I'm just pointing this out because that's the way of some people's thinking, that those that are being disruptive don't like something. Now, again, if you don't like something, okay, if you don't like it, that's your opinion. I have nothing against drag queens. I think that it's inventive. I think it's creative. It is a form of expression. And if people are doing it, as long as it's not harming anybody, then feel free to do whatever it is that you please. But I also love the fact that Drag Queen Story Hour, especially in libraries, have helped kids want to read more books. You know, outside of the opposite, which I'm about to get into, where certain schools and certain chapters don't want kids reading certain books. But amazing the fact that, God forbid a person dressed in drag wants to read to your child. And it's a book. The same thing you should be doing with your own goddamn child. But, Lorraine Boebert seems to be a nuisance everywhere she goes. But I just find it funny. She's part of that group that sits there and says that drag queens are bad. Might be a little bit of a hypocrite. But again, the one thing I want to point out, guys, before we get to our feel-good segment for tonight, again, I talked about books. Now, on this podcast, we did talk about it a few months ago where we sat there and said when the big push was parents wanting to get involved with the education of their child by simply telling these educational systems that, hey, we don't like what our child is reading, things of that nature. We want that banned. Keep in mind that the bans were about for books from authors who are people of color or members of the LGBTQ, or the members of the LGBTQ plus community. Well, here's the funny part. The American Library Association did a report on this and found out that most of the challenge titles that were written by or about people of color or members of the LGBT community were the books that they wanted out of their libraries. Now, why is that? I say it all the time because the big thing is we don't want our white children to be feeling embarrassed. Why? My biggest thing I always thought was funny where they didn't want To Kill a Mockingbird to be read by white people. Well, the book is about racism. Yes, that's the entire point of the book. Also, at the same time, if I were you, don't read Flowers in the Attic. You might not like that story. Don't read The Diary of Anne Frank. You might not like that story. Don't read Of Mice and Men. You really won't like that story. Or Fahrenheit 451. You won't like that story either. I can keep going down the list of so-called controversial books that certain individuals, white people, don't want in the hands of their children. They don't want I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. They don't want Strange Fruit to be listened to by their kids. They don't want, I can keep going down the list. They don't want certain books because you know what will happen? Because again, the last thing certain people, white people, don't want is cultural sensitivity. You know what cultural sensitivity does? It makes you empathize with people who are different than you. And God forbid, certain white people out there don't want their kids to empathize with minority kids because they're going to be wondering why their parents and those before them allowed this. See, that's the thing about it. They don't want the mindset. It is literally the greatest example of indoctrination that there is. We don't want you to think. We want you to listen to us and be happy about it. And that's what's so crazy about it. I mean, that they're afraid of their kids learning. Because let's be honest, in this day and age, most people don't want, and again, I find it amazing that when it comes to educators' jobs are to create critical thinking individuals because that's what we need in society. We don't need rubber stamping, button mashing foot workers. They don't think. They do as they're told, which is what they want. And as you can tell, the education is so bad that they have to change the grading scale just to make sure that no child gets left behind. And I say it once and I'll say it again. They will go after education because if you go after education first, you will affect the next generation after generation after generation until someone comes along and fixes it. Mark my words. But I find it amazing that the books that are being banned or being attempted to ban are by people of color and LGBTQ plus community. In the words, I always say the best, guys. And again, for kids who have to stumble on this podcast, listen to it, I say this wholeheartedly. Read the books they don't want you to read because there's something there they don't want you to learn that you should learn because why? Reading is fundamental. I know that sounds corny, but it's still true. But moving along, guys, we're going to get on to our feel-good segment because usually how the Frack we got here, we usually cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes they use faith in humanity, but hey, it's Wednesday, hump day. Tomorrow is Friday, which is Thursday, and we will leave you guys out some good vibrations. I believe this will definitely be it because it's the American dream. Imagine the fact, and what I mean by the American dream is owning your own home. I mean literally a place that you can call your own, not an apartment, not a rental, a place with a backyard fence so you can raise your kids. And the kids' expression on their new home is priceless.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Really happy that I started crying, and it was just a bunch of emotions just ran through me like a race.
These kids need space. The girls want to do gymnastics. They flipping all over the apartment. We don't really have space like that. My son plays baseball. They need a yard. Our last apartment, and that was just not going right. It was mold almost everywhere, and it was time to go. So we were put in a position where we literally had like less than 2 weeks to find a place to go.
We're going to surprise them. So we was always going out on our own, looking and searching for houses and stuff. And then like once we actually got the place, we was like, okay, now we have to figure out how to actually fool them.
They think we are just going to check out our cousin's new house, then going to our new apartment afterwards.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
I guess everybody's reaction, I was like, Jaden's gonna run around, Jordan's gonna cry, and Riley's gonna dance. So
I was happy and I was emotional because I was the one in my family begging for a 2-story house more than anything.
I've never been like, in my own backyard before. It really just feels like home, like a family home.
We used to go around and look at these houses like this. We're gonna get this house one day. We like this house. Just go around and look at different houses. And now we in a position where we see people ride by and look at our house. And we're like, okay, I feel very accomplished because I didn't think renting or buying, I didn't think that we would be in a house. So, this is our first house. We're the first people to ever live in this house. So all of that to me is just at the top of my accomplishment list. I don't think I've ever felt this type of high about life before. Like I being a veteran and having PTSD and going through the things I went through, like it's very easy for me to get depressed. But since I've been here, like I haven't really felt so hard on myself, so hard about life. So it's like a big, maybe this is what I needed. It's like a big weight off my shoulders.
And that's a beautiful thing. Like I said, the American dream, when you see stuff like that, guys, you can't help but, like I said, look, if you're gonna tear up, go and tear up. Because I was close. Ooh, I was close. I'm not gonna lie, I was close. I was really close by tearing up because again, the American dream, that's owning your own home, man. That's the ticket. That's the move. I would be lying if it's not. And the fact that that family was able to that couple was able to do that and actually surprise their kids. You don't get any more feel good than that. And again, hopefully that warmed your heart, maybe smile, maybe tear up a little bit. But anyway, that being said, guys, that's gonna do it for this podcast. So thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before you get out of here, guys. Shout out to my friend Bond at Big BZA Dot. You can definitely check him out, Big BZA Dot, everywhere you can find it. He does definitely do beats. Also, if you are looking for beats, whether it's for a show, whether it's for video, things of that nature, definitely check him out. He is the man to hook you up. Big BZA Dot on all social media. As for myself, guys, you can find me BlackBox447 on social media. I usually do reviews of everything that I read, that I watch, that I play, even gym stuff. I do a couple push-ups. The show itself, where you can find this, guys, the link at the bottom. You copy and paste that link into your browser, take you to my link tree that has the Facebook, YouTube podcast groups for all of my podcasts. How the Frack got here, Get Bit, of course, off my podcast. Definitely like, definitely share, definitely subscribe. Let me know of everything that you thought we talked about tonight. Again, my rule is keep it clean, keep it friendly. We are going to agree to disagree. But again, this isn't Fox News. We're not trying to burn somebody's head in. Let the facts do the talking at the same time. Again, agree to disagree, but get informed and get active. That is the whole point of the reason why I do this, is the fact that I strongly believe in the fact of being informed. Because with everything going on in the world today, guys, you can't help but want to get informed and get active, especially in your local communities. It's not just the federal side of things. Things can be changed at the local area. I'm talking your local governments, your local organizations, getting involved and getting active, pushing candidates that you believe fit your values. Or hey, if you feel like you can run yourself, go for it. There are plenty of sites out there that will show you how you can actually get it, how you actually can run for office and win. Change it. If you change your environment by changing your neighborhood, then you can possibly change the world. But at the same time, get informed and get active. You cannot complain if you've done nothing. And again, when it comes to voting, because voting is going to become very, very important. We are literally 3 months away from the 2024 presidential election, which means that we're going to see two groups try to nominate possibly Biden again. We'll see if Trump makes the cut. I'm not gonna lie to you. That's better than soap opera television right now. We will see if he makes it. Will he be in a jumpsuit? Will he get the nomination? It's kind of a toss-up. But the point I'm making out of this is, regardless how you feel along the lines, get informed, get active, at the same time, vote. The reason why I keep saying that all the time, vote, because they are trying everything on earth to make sure that you don't. And that alone should be a red flag to you and why you should get informed and get active. The last thing I'll say about how the Frack we got here, guys, all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind. But we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do better as a society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then. Like electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Third Board of Governors, electing possibly, if Tommy Tuberville doesn't get his shit together, could elect our first Black commander of the U.S. Marine Corps. All of these things are great. When we don't learn from history, that's when we're doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up on our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. We'll all get through this. Peace.